Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you here in our temporary library of the Goethe Institute Max Müller-Bewan, the Kumaraswamy Hall, to the first edition of Uncovering Urban Legacies, Stories of Bombay's Precincts. Each episode of this series will spotlight one of Bombay's iconic precincts, exploring its historical significance, architectural splendor, diverse cultural expressions, and culinary landscapes, showcasing Mumbai's multicultural fabric and cosmopolitan character. Tonight, this exploration will be focusing on Shivaji Park. We are particularly happy to join hands with Avid Learning, along with the Mumbai Research Center, Asiatic Society of Mumbai, Kalaguda Arts Festival, Street Art Mumbai Art Biennale, and Walkitech, because this series is very much in the framework of what we have been doing over the past years when it comes to our activities in Mumbai, and that is exploring the city through art, architecture, and city planning, literature, science, and the voices of the numerous communities calling Mumbai home. There are narratives and narratives about Mumbai, and we are excited to uncover together with you some of the most interesting ones over the past couple of months. A big thank you to our guests on stage tonight who are making the start and sharing their stories with us. I would also like to thank Asad from Avid Learning for suggesting this format and planning it out. And I would like to thank his team, of course, as well as our library and tech team here at Goethe Institute Max Müller-Bewan for the organizational part of it and setting it up. Now I would like to hand over to Asad, and he will give you an introduction of our panel and tonight's topic. And what's left to me is wishing all of you an interesting, insightful, and inspiring evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bjorn, for this warm introduction, and to Jayashri and you for this collaboration. It's wonderful to be back again at the Goethe Institute collaborating. Our last collaboration on the series was in 2016 for our second edition of our Beyond Contemporary Art series. All right, let's start. The maximum city of Mumbai has been a core focus of Avid's curatorial lens, serving as a muse for many of our programming initiatives. As many of you will remember, our Multipolis Mumbai series that we did close to 55 episodes, to Uncovering Urban Legacies, our series that explored the many facets of the city's landscape. In 2021, we started the Uncovering Urban Legacies, a series that looked at small but unique communities and how the rich culture and legacy have historically, economically, socio-culturally shaped the trading port city of Bombay. After dwelling into the diverse narratives of the Jewish, the Iranian, the Portuguese, the Chinese, the Armenian, Sindhis, Parsis, and Kolis, the series now shifts its focus to precincts, areas of heritage and cultural value that create a sense of place, a collective identity, and a feeling of pride to all the residents. What better precinct to begin this series than the iconic Shivaji Park? Nestled in the heart of Dadar, it is a living, breathing testament to Bombay's rich history and vibrant present. A place where echoes of speeches from activists and leaders are blended with cheers from budding cricketers, where sports, politics, culture, and community life intertwine seamlessly. This brings me to the task at hand. Avid Learning, in collaboration with the Goethe Institute Max Müller-Bewan Mumbai, the Kalakara Association, Walkitecture, Jojo Library and Bookshop, X and Zero presents Uncovering Urban Legacies, Stories of Bombay's Precincts, Shivaji Park. Please join me in welcoming our panel of experts, writer and translator Shanta Gokhale, visual artist and founder Editions Jojo Kamna Patel, chef, restaurateur and co-owner Home Chef Aditi Limai Kamath, and our moderator, and more importantly, our partner for this series, Principal Architect NM Associates and founder of Walkitecture, Nikhil Mahashur. Yay! We'll begin with Nikhil making a short presentation, after which he will invite the panel to begin his discussion. Thank you very much for being here and braving the rain. You know, we had many more people who registered, and because of this wonderful weather, we're also streaming it. So welcome to the people who joined us online. Thank you, and enjoy the discussion.
This is a little stressful because ma'am's sitting right in front of me, and whatever I've learned about Shivaji Park before I started my walks and the art deco is all from her books. I'm going to, ma'am, ask for an apology right at the start if I kind of make a little mistake in telling someone something about Shivaji Park. I've been living here for about 15 years. The rest of them have been, third generation and fourth generation at Shivaji Park. What I always felt about the art deco of Shivaji Park was, in comparison to, say, Churchgate and Colaba, is when I talk about food, I think, and I always say that on every walk of mine, that the art deco at Churchgate in Colaba is like pizza. Everyone loves it. The art deco at Mohammad Ali Road is like biryani, where you have to hunt for the smaller streets and then you see some really nice buildings. But the art deco at Shivaji Park is like simple Maharashtrian food, varan bhat, poli bhaji, where no one knows about it, but once they start eating it, they absolutely fall in love with it. And that's how Shivaji Park is. It's very simplistic, it's very easy on the eyes, and it's absolutely beautiful. So I'll start a little about the history of Shivaji Park. And of course, we've got Mahim and we've got Dadar right next to Shivaji Park. And Mahim actually gets its name because we had a Raja Bhima or Bhimdev, who came to an island, and he absolutely loved it. He thought it was absolutely beautiful because it had these stunning seas on the side, a lovely plantation, and it also you could actually see another beautiful place, which is Bandra across the sea. And he absolutely loved it, and he decided to name it after a goddess, which is Mahikavati. And he also, they say, called it Mahimati, which means miraculous, because he thought when he built his palace, he thought it was an absolutely miracle to be in that space, and that's how Mahim got its name. Though Mahim was ignored for a larger part of time, but it got its prominence when Lady Jamshedji actually paid about 1 lakh rupees to build the causeway in 1845, and that's when Mahim really, people got to know Mahim. But that was upper Mahim. And then there was lower Mahim, which is actually which is Dadar, which we call Dadar. But Dadar was essentially called Salve Song before that, because it had a lovely Portuguese church and it had a nice Portuguese town around it. So you can imagine how beautiful it was. You had the Portuguese church, which is not the modern structure right now that you see, but a much prettier oldish Portuguese church that was there. Dadar was usually ignored by the British because actually there was no trade around it. So the British obviously said that, we don't want to do anything there. So let's ship all the tanneries and the dye plants to Dadar. What they did was that they built trains right through, they built the tracks right through Dadar. And that became a great place because everyone who worked in the fort area or who was moderately rich, and of course some later who were very rich, came and settled in that area, which we now call Dadar. Once that happened, Dadar started growing and Mahim started growing, and Mahim was called Mahim Woods at that time because it was still a very densely populated area. So that's the map of Bombay, and when you see 45 written, that's actually where Shivaji Park was on the map. So how did Shivaji Park actually start was because of the plague. The plague happened in 1896, and then we had the Bombay Improvement Trust that came in, and they were assigned to actually take away all the influx of the population in South Bombay and shift it to the suburbs, which was then Dadar, Matunga, Sain, and all that area. So they acquired 440 acres of land, purchased land from about 1,200 people, and then started designing a town which would include Matunga, and they called it the Garden Cities of Bombay. Soon enough, they went to the railways and they told the railways that, look, now we're having a town, so please give us more railway tracks. And what they did was then they had one route that went to Mahim and one route which was the harbour line. So suddenly the Dadar station became a junction because it had so many lines coming into Dadar. And once that happened, they realized that they need roads as well. And they made 3 main roads that were planned. One was the road that was a 60 feet road, which was what we call Cattle Road now. So they decided to connect Worli to Mahim Causeway. The second one was a 100 feet road that they said that will connect Elphinstone Road to Mahim Causeway, and the third was Tulsi Pipe Road. So we had 3 avenues, if you see the map, that went around the number 45. And they realized suddenly that when these 2 roads came up, they realized that there was a marshy bit of land between these 2 roads, which was really good because it was really close to the station and it also was close to the sea. So why not, they said, why not build this locality? Why not build a precinct there? That was the birth of Shivaji Park. So they built a park there, which they called the Mahim Park in 1925. Shivaji Park, of course, was called much later in 1927, 2 years later, which was the 300th birth anniversary of Shivaji. And that's when it started being called Shivaji Park. So earlier, initially it was Mahim Park. That was actually, in Mahim Woods, and which is why it was called Mahim Park. What you see Cattle Road today was like a really small mud path at one point of time. And you can imagine the real estate today when you go to Shivaji Park or how rich and vibrant it is. But in a sense, it was just it was a wooded area at one point of time. And one point of time was not 1,000 years back. We're talking of only maybe 100, 150 years back. So Shivaji Park is again a very, very young heritage precinct. Of course, Bombay is very young in its architecture that way. But in a sense, Shivaji Park is more young than any of the other heritage precincts that we talk about. If you see the map, and you'll see that Shivaji Park is thronged by all these Art Deco buildings, and all these buildings started springing up by 1936, or rather the plots were all purchased by 1936, and by 1940 the second row of buildings, the plots were purchased. So it was a really, really popular place because people realized that they were really close to the sea, they were close to the station. Back then, the rich actually started, and this is what I've heard, was that the rich always purchased land next to the train stations. They didn't purchase next to the sea. Even Bandra grew like that. So when the Bombay Improvement Trust actually shifted people, they all occupied areas near the station. But this one augured really well because the sea was there as well as you had the train station close by, and that's why this became really popular. It became popular to the extent that it came in the headlines of the Times of India that how fast some real estate was selling out. Shivaji Park never comes in the headlines. We're quite modest and simple people in living in Shivaji Park. But this one came, this was the only headlines that actually hit the Times of India when it said that the plots were so popular. So why is Shivaji Park so popular? And the main thing that I feel is that it's actually very inclusive, number one. And number two is that it's got no boundary. If you look at Shivaji Park, it's something that is totally open. There's no fence to it. A park of that scale, to have no fence is quite unique in the city of Bombay. You go to any other Maidan, you go to Oval, Azad, they all have a fence that barricades you from getting inside. And this one must be the only park that's actually so inclusive. Mustasir Dalvi actually said that it's like a living room, that is inviting the people of the city to come and sit inside the park and then watch the world go by. I mean, how beautiful it is. And it's exactly like that. If you go there in the morning, you'll see these walkers walking. You go there in the afternoon, you'll see college students hanging around, and you'll see the servants from the flats sleeping there because it's so shaded that they can actually sleep on that katta, which is that cement concrete place. And the katta has seen so many things. First of all, a lot of gossip that happens. It's seen a lot of politics that happens. Bal Thackeray, of course, has given his first speech there, and even his last speech, which was, he had a lung infection and he came there and he was absolutely rapturous when he gave his last speech there. And that's not because of him, but I think it's because of the people who come there and listen to him so attentively. There's a horse at Shivaji Park, and that horse, and I feel it's very strange, but that's the most beautiful part of it, that the horse actually faces inside the park, and I've always wondered, when maybe this was about 5-6 years back, that every time I passed by the park, I always wondered that why is the horse facing inside and not outside, because you would actually want the horse to get prominence in the park. But that's the best thing, because you want everyone that's designed Shivaji Park wanted it to be so inclusive that you see the horse from the park and not from the road. So it was meant to be from the park. And of course it was crowd funded. Imagine a statue at that time being crowd funded. Every mill worker gave a rupee to actually crowd fund it, which is one of the most beautiful part of it. One of my favorite spots on the Shivaji Park, on the park, is the corner photo, and you'll see there's a vada pav stall, and that's the best place to get the best gossip, and the vada pav is really good. Sachin Tendulkar's made it very popular because he keeps talking about it, and whenever I've stood in line, I've had these really strange incidences. The last time I had this guy who was really upset with the vada pav owner because she doesn't do GPay and she takes only cash. And then when he went to her, he was still in that mood, and then he chided her on why she charged him 5 rupees extra for a pav, because way back when he had come the last time it was 5 rupees less. But in a sense, that's the true Maharashtrian who'll fight for every penny that's there, even if it's a vada pav. That's how we are. As I said, Sachin Tendulkar and Vinod Kamli, both, Achrekar sir was there coaching them, and no Shivaji Park talk can be incomplete without Sachin Tendulkar's photo. But Shivaji Park is not only about cricket; it's much more than that. And the most popular place there is the Malkham that happens, and you can see the Malkham Institute. But I decided to put the gate of Shivaji Park that showcases the Malkham. There's a lot of kabaddi that happens as well. So basically, it's very intrinsic. So it's not only related to it's not only related to cricket, and you get a lot of other sports as well, and that's the beauty of it. There's a Nagrik Sangh as well. There are a lot of temples around. So though you have an Art Deco shield all around Shivaji Park, the fun happens inside the park. So they've taken a little area around inside the park, and you've got all these activities. And if you go there in the evening or in the morning, you're going to have a lot of public and a lot of kids as well at Shivaji Park, which makes it very unique because you have all ages of people that actually come and sit around the space. So the architecture of Shivaji Park is a modest example of Art Deco. It's basically what we call Indo-Deco because it's got a lot of Indian features in the building. What happened is that in 1936, when we started off, building in Shivaji Park, the prices of construction material came down. So if you were building in 1920s, you were making bungalows, but the minute you started building in 1936 onwards, the prices were so low that they decided to, instead of making bungalows, they could actually make a 2- and 3-storied building, and which actually benefited for Shivaji Park. For those who don't know, Art Deco is actually art decoratives, and it came from Paris in 1925. You had an exhibition there because people had no money after the war, or a little less money, and they said, why not? Everyone is traveling in ships, planes, and trains, and they said that why not use that kind of design on buildings? Because essentially, though you didn't have any money to show off, you still wanted to show off. So if you're using this, you could actually build better buildings, and that's showcased in the Art Deco exhibition. And it spread like wildfire. It went to Miami on one side and Shanghai on the other. And the same guys who were building in Bombay were actually also traveling and seeing Art Deco all over the world. So it is imperative that they all came back and built Art Deco around the 20s and the 30s. And fortunately, Shivaji Park also boomed at that time, and that's why you had Art Deco in Shivaji Park. When I say Indo-Deco, you have Salset Deco, which is at Bandra. And as I said, because this was very simple, it had a lot of Indian features to go with it. What I'll do is I'll show you a few buildings and then you'll kind of recognize it. I don't want to kind of point out to every building, but if you see, it's completely different from the ones that you see at Churchgate and maybe at Colaba. It's got a little Indian feature. The names are also very, very Indian. And also you'll always find some element. You'll find a swastik there, or you'll find an Om there. A lot of Indian elements on the building. This is one of my favorite buildings, which is Lakshmi Nivas, and the next one is Sea View. Both actually opposite each other. I think Lakshmi Nivas is where Kamna lives. Quite lucky. If you see the building, it's got everything that an Art Deco building would have. It's symmetrical. It's got a central corridor of a staircase. But the most beautiful part is you'll see the lotus that represents Lakshmi that's there. So again, if you look at the building, it's really, really very Indian in its taste. Another building which is Sea View, and you look at the windows and you look at the columns and you look at the columns on the top there, and you'll realize how Indian it is. You must have seen this building in one of those Brahman Sevaks Or if you go to Girgaon, you will see these kind of columns that are there, the two columns with a little smaller capital, and that's what gets you to Shivaji Park. Again, a very lovely building, Park View, which is right on the center where Home Chef is, and again a very, very Indian looking building. You had RCC, so suddenly the rooftops suddenly changed. You didn't have chhajjas to be built. You could actually make terraces because of RCC, and you will find that all these buildings will have balconies because RCC allowed you to actually change the depth, shape, and size of every balcony. Shanta Kokle ma'am, that's your words. I actually took that up and said that. Again, if you look at it, if you look at the details again, in concept, it's the same as what you will get in Churchgate, but again, the left and the right wing, but again, very, very simple. And if you see the corner building that's there, the pink building, that is maximum Shivaji Park, no decoration, just a few openings. It looks like a geometrical pencil box or something kept vertically, but that's how the buildings would look. You had the locomotive balconies that were there, which again you would find all over Churchgate. Again, if you look at Penzo Villa and if you look at Vandana, and you'll realize how Indian it is. You wouldn't find a building like this anywhere else. It's again the colors are beautiful, and though the building would resemble a building in Churchgate, if you look closely, you'd realize that it's much more simpler than that. The windows are quite essentially a straight line. Again, look at the balconies, very industrial, but Dwarka Kunj is again very simple. And I'll just take you through these. Again, very lever-like. This is the plan. And there was something that I quite didn't understand about the plans of Shivaji Park. When I shifted here 15 years back, if you see, that's the plan of my house. And it's quite odd, and my mom used to keep criticizing the plan because the kitchens were awry and the toilet was awry. And it's still, I think it's the worst for Vastu. I think if it comes to Vastu and you say Art Deco in Shivaji Park, I think it'll still be really, really bad. But most buildings in Shivaji Park now have a lift that's been attached to, and if you see the corner of the plan, it's there. A lot of buildings, a lot of houses had two doors. One door was for the main people to enter, and the second door, because of the caste system, was for the servants to enter to clean the toilet. And you must have seen all over Bombay, you would have seen a spiral staircase that goes on these old buildings, and those were actually the product of Art Deco, where they had the toilets first of all came inside. Sanitation was solved by Art Deco. Earlier, you would actually have the toilets outside, and you would, even at 3 a.m. in the morning, you would actually go into the bathroom which was in the other block. This actually solved it because you got the toilets inside, and then you had two doors for the toilet cleaning. If you ever see a bathroom, if you ever see a building, Art Deco building with toilet pipes on the outside, please curse the owner, because it's actually agreed that first we wanted the toilets inside our flats, and now because it's agreed that we want toilets next to our bedroom, which we now call the en-suite or en-suite, or we say we want an attached bathroom. And suddenly when the attached bathroom comes in the front, then you have pipes that are there on the Art Deco, which really spoil the beauty. There's one thing which changed in Art Deco was that we got the kitchen right next to the living room. If you see, even houses today designed have the kitchen next to the living room. It was because after the war, and this happened in the Americas, is because of the war, the man had come home with a broken limb. If you read any English novel or watch a movie, you'd always see a butler coming in and serving food. And that butler essentially came from a kitchen at the back. But with Art Deco, what happened is that they didn't have money for the butler. So the maids were out. The husband had come home with a broken limb. And the woman was actually also cooking food. And she was also going out to work and earning money. And she said that, if I am going to do everything in this house, I better have a voice in the house. And that's the reason that you got the first concept of the open kitchen that came in America. Frank Lloyd Wright was the guy who actually was the architect who actually started that trend. And you had kitchen and you had the living room right next to it, because then the woman could also cook and also talk to the family that was there in the living room. And till today, that's not changed. And even in Bombay, if you look at all the floor plans, you'd always see that the living room is right next to the kitchen, which started the trend. And even today, of course, if you're an Ambani, etc., you'll still have the kitchen right at the back. But 90% of the times, the kitchen in any flat in Bombay today is right next to the living room. And that was the product of Art Deco. Again, simple details, and you'll see that they're very, very Indian in nature. This one is Sara Cottage, which has, if you can look at, you'll see a Star of David on the thing because the wife was Jewish. Again, very simple, very Indian. You had a lot of, you have a swastik there. You had a lot of these concrete details that came in because it was mass produced. We thought of the American diner or the burger came in because of an art deco, because everyone had less labor and they wanted to do everything mass produced. And which is why you have a lot of concrete grills that came up in art deco. And you go to one building in Shivaji Park, you might go to, say, Bandra, and you'll see a bungalow in Bandra and then push off to Churchgate and see a building there. And you might find the same grill that's there. And that's because everyone made grills together. It was mass produced. 100 grills may be produced. 50 went to the building at Shivaji Park. 10 went to the building in Bandra. And that's why, that's how you have these mass produced concrete builds. And if you look at it, there's one building that I really like, and you'll see it's a very Indo-Sarsenic, Rajasthani looking arch on an art deco building, and it's really beautiful when you go there. Again, look at the concrete grills. There's a porthole as well. There's a swastik in the gate, in the compound wall. There's a frozen fountain detail as well. This is again something that I love. Arches that are created. I don't think so anyone will do it today. If you just look, there's a shadow there, which means they've actually given a lot of thickness and they've actually sloped it. Smaller details like this make up Shivaji Park, and these details are also found in the villages. If you go to Pali village or you go to Khutachi Wadi, and you will find the same details that are there on the compound walls. This is Udyam, and I decided to take this because this was N.V. Modak's bungalow, and N.V. Modak was the planner of Shivaji Park. He actually is called the father of Shivaji Park, and he designed Shivaji Park to what it is today. I chose this because it's actually right next to three of us on the panel. Ma'am lives close to it, I live close to it, and Home Chef is where Aditi's baby is right next to this bungalow. And to talk about it in more detail, I'll call the panelists up.
So, ma'am, we put up N.V. Modak's bungalow, and essentially it's not only a bungalow close to us, but it essentially tells us a lot of stories as well. It tells us the importance of the planning of Shivaji Park. So we would like you to give us a little more in-depth knowledge on that.
Yeah. First of all, if in the old days you said that you lived near Modak Engineeranचा Bangla, you didn't have to say anything further. People knew exactly what you meant. Later on, of course, that age passed and people gradually forgot who he was. But while he lived, he worked as a special engineer for the municipal corporation. And he did some amazing work for Dadar and for the city of Bombay. The Vaitanad Dam was his design. It's now called Modak Sagar, named after him. There was a sewage plant which he set up where water was distilled, clean of all impurities, and provided to textile mills. So there was this recycling happening with very little wastage. And there was a meeting held in Shivaji Park where citizens were, in the old days, extremely vocal about their rights, and particularly their rights to question and to argue. So they wanted to know all this money that was being sunk into sewage. How did it, how good was it? Was it really cleaning sewage and turning it into clean water? So, of course, Nana Sahib Modak said, frankly, it's even clean enough to drink though it's not meant to be drunk. It's being supplied to textile mills. And then he called for a glass of that water, because that's the only way you can convince the middle-class Maharashtrian. So he took a sip, and he stood there, undead. And then, of course, the crowd was convinced that, yes, okay, this sewage plant is worth setting up, worth the money that we are putting in. But simple things, the two circular roads that ring Shivaji Park, which give it its specific design. It's a simple thing. The park has a certain shape, and you keep to that. Your roads follow those curves. And that's what makes a precinct. If you have a curved park and straight roads, doesn't really make visual sense. So a simple thing like that the roads followed the curve of the park. Then the plots were perfectly spaced. Each plot, each building that went up had to have either 2 or 3 stories and no more. The idea was that if you stood in the park and looked around, you didn't see the kind of regular architecture that you see on the Queen's necklace. It wasn't. Each individual house was differently designed, and yet, standing in the park and looking out and around, you felt a oneness, a unity in the designs of those buildings. A, because they were all of the same height. B, because they all had dwarf walls. So you could see into the building, the people in the building could see out into the park. And the entire idea, of course, was that there should be a free flow of air. As Nikhil said, Shivaji Park came into being after the plague. And the whole idea was to decongest the city of Mumbai. And if people were being shifted, it was a good thing for them to have more space than they would in the city. So the plots were so designed that there was enough space all around, and there was, of course, the park in front. And the park was where you slept in the afternoon if you wanted to. There wasn't public demonstration of affection, not too openly, but there were hedges and bushes, and you tried not to look behind them. And most importantly, dogs. Dogs consider Shivaji Park to be their home. They're all there, sitting on the katta, making their little holes in the ground to curl up in cozily. And there was a friend of mine who lived in Shivaji Park, who's moved now, who has a collection of 18 dog stories. And if I wasn't told by my publisher that this book has to be only at the most 40,000 words, some of those stories would surely have got into the book. So it's that kind, as Nikhil said, open space. Come, do what you like. It's yours. There's a open gymkhana where there's equipment and it's free. It's not your Talwalkar, it's not your fancy anything where you pay high fees and have trainers. No trainers. There's just a statue of Hanuman. And there's people who come in and use the equipment. So this whole feeling of freedom, which is what made Shivaji Park into a kind of close-knit community. And people didn't come so happily to Shivaji Park, let me tell you, because people, the traders in places like Karvadevi and Bhuleshwar had to stay where they were because their businesses were there. The people who were shunted out or wheedled out of the center of the city were clerks, government officers, who could now travel by train into the center of the city. So it was basically a middle and lower middle class neighborhood. And many of them came from the chawls of Girgaon. And now you may say to these Marathi girls, chawl, and they will say, oh yeah, we know, there used to be chawl. But my generation of people, chawl brought stars into people's eyes. Chawls were the place to be because this was community living. People had come from the interiors of Maharashtra, from the coast of Maharashtra, to find jobs. And they had lost that village feeling of being a community, which they rediscovered in the chawl. And once you were in a chawl, you didn't really want to go to what were called blocks in those days. The apartment flats were called blocks. And I really feel that the word itself was indicative of how people felt about you. Blocked in a chawl, you were free. There was a common corridor. Fine, there was a common toilet, but it's okay. There was a courtyard. There were commonly celebrated festivals. So people weren't that keen to come to Shivaji Park. And because they weren't keen, the municipal corporation actually provided incentives for their engineers to buy plots. And the area of Shivaji Park in which the engineers bought those plots was called Engineer Colony. So they had to be wheeled out of chawls to come and stay. Very unlike what happens now, where people are dying to come to Shivaji Park. Back then people said, Shivaji Park, where's that? So it's no longer that. But Modak, the tiny little, sense of focus. What am I trying to do? I am trying to give every resident in this neighborhood fresh air from the park. So how do I do it? When I arrange the plots, I don't like a dumb so-and-so put them straight in front of each other. I stagger them so that there's space for this building, for air to flow from the park through that gap into this side. And it's the simplest idea, but it came because the focus was so sharp that the purpose of this neighborhood is to provide airy residential flats to the middle class. Have I said enough?
Not enough. You can go on. So, you've told us the base of Shivaji Park, but I want you to highlight some of the, if you can, some of the personalities that were there at Shivaji Park. So, it could be Savarkar, Thackeray, Acharya Atre. So, all these stories, because that will intertwine what really Shivaji Park also meant to everyone.
Yes, Thackeray.
You can miss.
Because he was a neighbor. Well, actually for me, Thackeray Senior existed more strongly than Hriday Samrat Barasaheb Thackeray. Thackeray Senior was an extremely progressive man who published a magazine called Prabodhan, which means enlightenment, and that's why he came to be called Prabodhankar Thackeray. A simple-looking man, whom I remember personally, because the little lane at the end of which they lived backed the bus stop where I used to catch my bus to go to school. All of us, I believe, all went to Scottish. The school was called Scottish Mission School in your days. Scottish School. In my time, it was an orphanage. Bombay Scottish Orphanage Society's high school. But the school is the same. Anyway, so I used to catch the F-Route bus from in front of Thackeray's little lane. And very often he would be standing outside at the mouth of the lane, scowling at the world. He didn't much care for what he saw, obviously. He was rabidly anti-Brahmin. Rightly, I guess. For the right reasons, let me say. I think that scowl probably came for that reason, because Shivaji Park had lots of Brahmins. Clerks, Brahmins. So, that was Prabodhankar Thackeray. Barasaheb Thackeray and his brothers grew up there. And I have included that story in the book, which really amused me when Nanasaheb Modak's nephew, who lives in Shivaji Park, told me the story. We used to have a barber called Shankar, who came around and shaved everybody. My grandfather was also shaved by him. So he did his rounds. A wonderful person in impeccable white and a Gandhi cap and a nice, neat little bag which carried his tools. And he went from house to house, shaving, massaging, whatever else the men wanted done. Modak's nephew said to me, when Shankar came to give us our haircuts and shaves, we knew exactly which side of Shivaji Park he had come from. If he was ferocious with our skins, we knew he had come from the Thackeray side. And when we found him tender and gentle with our skins, we knew he came from Sudhir Phadke's side. Sudhir Phadke was a singer of Bhavageets, emotional songs. He also sang G.D. Badgulkar's Geeta Ramayan. He was one of the best loved voices in Maharashtra. So, Sudhir Phadke also lived there and affected Shankar's Vastara. Then there was Atre. Atre was a fantastic personality. I had seen him a few times because he lived next to your building, across from Park Club. And he would once in a while be seen in the veranda, bare-chested, taking the air. So, but more than seeing him, one had read him and heard him, because he was actually an educationist. He had a diploma in teaching from London, and when he came back to Mumbai, he was very depressed to see the kinds of readers that were being, which were being used to teach Marathi to school children. He said, a language has to be loved. You don't study language as a subject for exams. You have to fall in love with a language. And how can you do that if a reader gives you this kind of dry stuff? So instantly he got a few other like-minded people together, and they brought out 2 readers, one for primary schools, one for secondary schools, Navayug Vachanmala, Aruna Vachanmala. And people of my generation and even slightly younger, even today, swear by those readers and say that if they love the Marathi language, it is because of those readers which they followed in school. So that was one big contribution that Atre made. The other was, he was a journalist editor, and he ran this, he edited this extremely popular daily called Maratha, and a weekly called Navayug. So that was a second part of his giant personality. Third part was he was a playwright. He wasn't an original playwright by any means. He adapted foreign plays into Marathi and made them hugely popular. He adapted Charlie's Aunt into Marathi as Moruchi Maushi. And then that play got adapted into a Hindi film called what?
Auntie Number One. Auntie Number One.
Auntie Number One.
Govinda's.
With Govinda, that's right. So that's his other contribution. He also directed 2 films, both of which won awards. The first one was his adaptation of Shamchi Ai, which is a classic in Marathi literature. And the woman who played Ai was the actress called Vanmala. And she, in fact, was his live-in partner. So we used to go to your neighborhood to look into their house, because to catch a sight, at least of them separately, if not together.
That works.
So that was Mr. Atre, and he was one of the leaders of the Sanyukta Maharashtra movement, and so was Keshav Sitaram Thakare, Bal Thakre's father. And it was a coming together of 5 different ideologies, political ideologies, but all focused on this one objective, that Maharashtra must become a linguistic state, a separate state. And as often happens, I think, on all political gatherings, there were things happening, as they say, on the sidelines. So a very famous quarrel was happening on the sidelines of Sanyukta Maharashtra movement between Thackeray and Atre. So it was in those days a very well-known quarrel. People kind of dined out on that quarrel for months afterwards. So that, and Atre was like Mufat.
But he taught, he used to take rounds at Shivaji Park with a lot of people and teach them things, and that's why he was called Acharya Atre?
No. Acharya is teacher, because he was an educationist, therefore he was called Acharya.
But what I read was that he was, anyone who wanted to talk about Shivaji Park or Marathi, and he used to give them a lecture at the park. He was quite, that way, quite eager to share his knowledge.
Yeah, he was eager to talk. So,
he was an architect?
So that was Atre. But two young women, not young anymore, who one of them has been mentioned in the book, one not. You know that Shivaji Park had a lot of people associated with films in those days, because there were a couple of studios, Ranjit Studio, some other studio in Dadar, and which attracted not just actors, some actors. There was a pair, I think people from my generation may recall them, called Gop and Yakub. They were a funny pair, and we used to think of them as Laurel and Hardy. But they lived in Shivaji Park. There were, baby Nanda lived in Shivaji Park, a whole lot of people. Also belonging to ancillary industries like poster and banner painters. We had in our own gully 3 of them, and one of them lived in the annex of one of the buildings that you showed, Park View, which is opposite to Modak's bungalow. This was Vishwanath Bhide, whose professional name was B. Vishwanath. They were all like that in those days. Shantaram Vankudre was V. Shantaram. Avdut Vankudre was V. Avdut, so on and so forth. So this was V. Vishwanath, and he was one of the most prolific banner and poster painters of those years. He painted for Saurabh Modi, he painted the first Technicolor films, etc. Now, he was one of the most flamboyant men who lived in Shivaji Park. As I said earlier, most of people were like clerks, quiet shirts, simple living. Bhide was flamboyant, and he drove a car. Very few people drove cars back then. And his daughter then became a Bharatanatyam dancer, Sucheta Bhide Sapekar. She lives in Pune now. But what we saw as we grew up was the father taking the daughter regularly, every day, by car to her dance class in Girgaon. And which tells you of the kind of importance that music and dance had in the life of Shivaji Park. It was music more, I think, than dance. So that was one famous daughter growing up at one end of my gully. At the other end was Ashwini Bhide Deshpande, who is one of the most popular singers today. And her entire family is musical. And she is also no longer a Shivaji Park person. She moved to Bandra. But it was wonderful to see these young girls taking their first steps into their chosen art, one dancing, the other singing. And they're both well-known artists today. Who else?
You?
No.
So, ma'am, we'll come back to you because you're going to recite a paragraph from your book. So, I'll just move on to Aditi. She's also got a flight to catch. So, Aditi, tell me, you're running such a successful restaurant in Shivaji Park, unbelievably, as I keep saying. You being a fourth generation resident here, was a restaurant like Home Chef always a dream, or you wanted to go like your family has done, doing Gypsy Chinese and Gypsy Corner?
So, I think I manifested Home Chef. I grew up in Portuguese church, and it looked much, much nicer when I was growing up. When I say fourth generation, my great-grandfather came to Mumbai from Karachi. And, we as a family lived together till I was 20. I lived with, I was the fourth generation in the house. So, being born and brought up in Dadar family is very, very important. As a kid, I was given 20 rupees to go cycle. And if there's anyone from Shivaji Park here, right next to Home Chef, there used to be a little shop called Babu Cycle Shop. All of us learned how to ride a cycle there. So those 20 rupees that my mother gave, 10 rupees would be a half an hour cycle, 5 rupees would be a vada pav, and 5 rupees would be a little Pepsi Cola that we got back then. So that's how I grew up. I went to catering college, didn't get into the Dadar one, so I got into Sophia Polytechnic. And then I worked at the Oberoi's and Indigo for a while. Back then, we young girls would walk around Shivaji Park. And while walking, I used to always say, one fine day, I hope to get this Irani light of Bharat and open my little cafe there. Little did I know, in 2009, I started Home Chef right next to Light of Bharat. So when I say this, I genuinely manifested, Home Chef to be in Shivaji Park. So it was my dad in 1981, Rahul Limaye, who started Gypsy back then. It started off as an American fast food restaurant. I'm not sure many people know. So when Gypsy opened, Daddy tried to serve the crunchy fried chicken and finger chips back then, which are now French fries, and mutton cutlets and so on. It didn't do well. His background was then of Gazebo Oriental. He used to work there earlier on. And he said, why not show a true Dadarite how to eat Hakka noodles and vegetarian Manchurian? So that's how Gypsy Chinese happened in 81. And I always say that was my father's first baby. So on Gypsy Corner, where, which is very, very famous for pav bhaji and chaat. I think one of the few places in Dadar that serves really good chaat. Back in 2002 or 3, it was my mother who realized that there were other Maharashtrian eateries in Dadar, be it a Panchikar, Prakash, Aswad, that were doing misal pavs and vada pavs and sabudana vadas maybe. Nobody was actually serving home, like Marathi food that we eat at home. So be it something like a dadpe pohe, be it like a shingada shira, be it like pitla bhakri. So it was my mom's idea to start this in Gypsy Corner. And we weren't really sure how it would do, because we were like, who's going to, which Maharashtrian is going to come to Gypsy and eat like a, pitla bhakri? Till I was speaking to Nikhil yesterday and he was like, you know what, my wife doesn't cook pitla bhakri and I go to Gypsy to eat.
And the chart is absolutely, we'll do a little PR of your restaurant. But the chaats are the best in Shivaji Park. But all around, I don't think so. Mahim has chaat as well.
No.
You don't get chaat till you reach Phoenix,
Matunga.
maybe? Yeah, Matunga. But on this side,
No.
till Phoenix, if you go to Trupti, you'll get chaat. But no good
Absolutely.
chaat all the way
So
through.
I think there's so much more to Maharashtrian food than just serving a sabudana vada and a vada pav and a misal. So I think we really tried to bring in the entire Marathi Brahmini culture, so-called, into Gypsy Corner with the food, and it worked really well. Then came a time where I was out of catering college. I always dreamt of becoming a chef. Food was all I saw when I was growing up because my dad only spoke of food. And when I actually worked at the Oberoi's and Indigo, I thought when I open my restaurant, I will come back and serve exactly what I have learned there. Little did I know that what you serve in a South Mumbai, you cannot serve in a Dadar. So I still remember a funny incident in 2009-10 when we opened Home Chef. Mozzarella cheese was very new. Everyone made pizza at home, but everyone really grated that Amul cheese block. I still think Amul cheese is damn good, huh? But I tried to use mozzarella cheese on the pizza, and I tried to use parmesan on a pasta. And back then we used to have these little notes that we'd serve our customers to write their feedback. And I remember going to work the next day and reading that pasta was nice, but why did you put grated coconut? And I was like, back then we didn't serve anything that had grated coconut. Then my manager, who was also a Maharashtrian, Patil, he said, "Madam, I think they tumi parmesan cheese takla hota, that's a smell, and the gratedness people did not like." So it took me a year and a half to actually understand what people wanted in Dadar. And I think that's something that I learned from my father. He tweaked Chinese food to a Marathi palate. I think I tweaked Italian continental food to a Marathi Gujarati palate. And mind you, there are not only Maharashtrians living in Dadar. I think Dadar has changed drastically. A lot of younger people living there now. So, from 2009, we're in 2024. Home Chef still remains a 30-seater eatery, but there's so much more that we do now at Home Chef. In 2013, I jumped into an opportunity of opening Mumbai's first bar owned by a girl. And I opened it right in the heart of Shivaji Park. It was called Open House. I met Kamna there for the first time in 2014. And I think I taught the other girls how to have beer. So you go for a walk and come to the bar and have beer. So I think culture was ready to change. I'm happy to be a small part in changing these things around Dadar and absolutely enjoyed it. So for me, Dadar is very, very close to my heart. Shivaji Park even closer. You guys know my husband is from Marine Drive. I actually have made him a Dadar right now. We moved to Dadar.
So we don't have only people shifting from Girgaon, but we also now have people shifting from Marine Drive. Ma'am,
absolutely.
That could be your next chapter on your next book. Aditi, tell us a little about the changing cuisines. Where are we headed in Shivaji Park? Because it's suddenly opened up so many restaurants all around, and it's quite cool because every time you walk by, you've got a new restaurant coming in. Some garage has a new restaurant that's opened up, and it's completely changing the scene there.
Very true. So Dadar does have a lot of Maharashtrian cuisine restaurants. But for me, I was just actually chatting with Kamna. I think the lockdown really changed my perspective of business. First, also let me tell you that, I don't know, do many of you all know Oven Fresh in Shivaji Park? So Oven Fresh has been my inspiration to open Home Chef. The owner, Ronak, is a dear friend. And I remember due to his family things, he converted it into a vegetarian restaurant. And I was looking for places around to open Home Chef back then. And it was Ronak who told me, "Arey, mere samne jagah milega, le, mera chicken sandwich abhi tu bech." So that's how these things happened, and they've continued. In the lockdown, we realized that people were ready for a change. We started doing home catering, which we didn't do earlier. So there are people in and around Dadar, Shivaji Park, who don't want to cook food at home on a weekend for a party of 8, 10, 15, 20. And we thought, why not experiment into this home catering culture? And that's really picked up. All this happens a lot around Bandra and South Mumbai, but even in Dadar, this is really picking up. I think with everyone's diet fads, we started serving vegan, keto, and gluten-free food, which we didn't in Home Chef earlier. That has picked up so much that I've had to add it on a Zomato and Swiggy menu now. So that's something also that we're culturally seeing people change in diet. People first didn't only want to eat a garlic bread with cheese. Now they don't even want to eat butter. What do we do? And this happens in every family. You know, there's one vegetarian, one vegan, one gluten-free. So I think we've been able to cater to a larger crowd, and I think that's probably one of our success stories also. I think in the coming years, this kind of food is here to stay, but now we are ready for a change. From the last 5 years, I have come back to a mozzarella, I have come back to a parmesan, because the kind of people living in Shivaji Park today are young couples, both working, double income, everyone's moving around the world, people have tasted various cuisines, and they now know that pasta has to be al dente. You can't overcook a pasta. 10 years ago, I could do it to a customer. Today, a customer will come back and tell me, "Aapka pasta thoda zyada cook ho gaya hai." So I actually like this change. The other change I see is coffee. I love coffee, and I'm a big, big coffee lover. In fact, we started making our own coffee at Home Chef now. But earlier, I think coffee was served only on that side of the park, where there was barista and cafe coffee day. Now this side, we're open to a Starbucks. We've got the Costa, and last 6 months, I have seen at least a 70 to 80% rise in even serving coffee at Home Chef. So I think these things, I think we got to accommodate to what people want. I met a friend who just moved into Dadar 2 months ago, and he was telling me that he's been coming to Home Chef to drink coffee and to grab a bite. So it's nice to have younger people come and even tell us what they want. In Dadar, what really works is if you cater to their needs. Last year, for the first time in Mumbai, we had a Shravan festival where we served sizzlers. I served a Shravan sizzler. I served exactly like what you would eat during a Shravan fast, but onto a sizzler platter. As weird as it may sound, we were sold out. So people are ready to experiment, provided you give them good quality, and I think that's what I chose to do for the next couple of years.
Fantastic, Aditi. I'm going to move on to Kamna now. So Kamna, you've been, again, like Aditi, you've been a 4th generation resident of the area, and you started Editions, Jojo, and the library. In what way did it connect to your roots? Was it something that you thought that there was a need for a library there? Because I think that was the only library that I know of in the area also, correct?
Actually, perhaps if you read page 29 of Shantaji's book, you know what the first Dadar Public Library.
No, public library, I get it, but
no, 100%, you're fourth generation, yes. So my grandfather's family moved from Gujarat, and my mom's side of the family moved from UP. So I'm 3rd generation from that side and 4th generation from my dad's side. The library actually started quite by accident. So Editions Jojo was it started as a self-publishing practice as an extension of my own practice as a photographer. And in 2020, there was a collective called the Bind Collective that had actually started this library purely because it was very hard to access photo books in India at the time. And so they started it in 2015, I believe. And then in 2020, they stopped kind of working together because they all went different ways. And they were looking for somebody to manage the collection. And because I was already publishing photo books, I agreed to take on the management of the library. And that's how it happened. So the library kind of moved from Trilogy, so Trilogy Library is actually a bookshop and a library now in Bandra, but before the collection was living on one of their shelves when they were in Lower Parel, and then they moved to Bandra, and then during the lockdown they shut down temporarily, and that's when I took over the collection, and it sat in my studio floor in Lakshmi Nivas for a good part of 2 years, where people would come into the house to kind of access the books, and then it moved to now its own home in this Art Deco building where my dad's side of the family grew up in, and it's now in the garage of that building. And actually that's why I kind of connected it to that part in Shantaji's book, because it also was kind of started just like the other public library with this intention of a private collection in some way getting public engagement, started by like-minded people who were just moving from house to house as the library grew, and then eventually it kind of found its own home in this garage. Why Shivaji Park and why the garage? Well, the garage because, like you very rightly said in the beginning in your presentation, that Art Deco construction is cheap, and in the spirit of it being cheap, I was given
Economical.
I was given the garage for 2 years by my family, and they said, okay, you have 2 years to do what you want with it. And we opened it up and we found all these old doors that had come out from, the first floor apartment that had been, both the first floor apartments that had been renovated. So all those old teak wood doors that were originally from the building were being stored in the garage, along with some other furniture that had kind of been, discarded, and we didn't know what to do with it because it was really good, but there's no place to keep it. And so I tried to upcycle all of that as much as possible, and we repurposed those doors. We knocked out the center panels, put glass, so that, I also wanted to retain a little bit of the history of that building and all of the original architecture that came out of it. And so we tried to repurpose whatever we could and fit it into the library. So now if you go, the doors are still, part of that history. The money that went into it was a little bit that my grandfather left me when he passed away, which got kind of put into building, the library and the shelves and everything that we needed. So it was kind of in his memory as well. And the floors were donated by Bharat Flooring after our last Avid panel, where Asad put us all together. We'll see. So that's kind of how the library was born. And it's really interesting to see it evolve in Shivaji Park. One, because Shivaji Park is that middle ground, it's like what Shantaji said earlier. People still say it, Shivaji Park, where's that? Now people take the highway and they kind of go past Shivaji Park. So it's still not really as iconic, other than, when Times of India prints the property prices of Shivaji Park every now and then. And so when people come to the library, they're also discovering the neighborhood in some way, and that to me is really nice. I think that it's kind of it's not so much me responding to the park, but people coming in and responding to it because there's a library to go to. Why are people coming all the way to Shivaji Park to this library? I suppose I should probably define what a photo book is, because that's also a question that I get a lot. What is a photo book? Right?
Which is Dory?
Dory is one of the photo books that I published as Editions Studio.
So with that, you can also tell us how you came up with Dory, which is a lovely book. Dory is a book that Kamna's written, and there's a copy there and at the entrance as well.
So it was the second self-published book as Editions Jojo. Jojo has since evolved to publish other photo books now. But it also, the reason we're talking about it is because it was also photographed in my family building in the home I grew up in. And it's a documentation of my paternal grandparents over 5 years, between 2010 and between 2015 and 2020. And it's a documentation of the spaces they occupy, but also the relationship that they shared. And I don't know, by extension, I think now that I'm speaking about it in the context of this neighborhood and the changing aspects of the community and the culture there, I think it's very much a marker of time, of a type of love, of a type of relationship, of a type of familial setup that I think is moving more and more nuclear as time moves forward. And that's why it's also called Dory, because Dory is a thread, and I think this book ties me and my generation to their generation. As a photo book, essentially a photo book would use images as its primary language. So whereas a novel would use words and text as something that is flowing in a certain chronology intended by a writer to be read in a particular way. In the same way, a photo book would use photography or visual language in a certain chronology and a certain design for it to be able to tell the story that it intends to. And so in that sense, it's different from a coffee table book, it's different from a magazine, it's different from any other media that uses photography within its pages. And the library is now home for over 500 of such photo books from all over the world. It's a collection that's been painstakingly put together by the collective that started it before me, and after that, I've tried to add to it as much as possible, and that's why people come from all over to Shivaji Park to read these photo books, because it really is a precious resource. And sometimes, people from the neighborhood will come in, and I had this one uncle who I've known since I was a child. He came and he said, "You're starting a photography library. Do you know who the best photographer in Bombay is? It's Uddhav Thackeray." He also has a photo book apparently, which is this wildlife photography book. I was like, okay. And his wife donated a whole collection of Mark magazines to the library, which is another precious resource. That kind of, it's not photography necessarily, but it reflects upon it. So. I think being in Shivaji Park also decentralizes the art scene in the city somehow. We're going out of South Bombay, we're going out of the suburbs and coming to a place where you wouldn't otherwise go to unless you had a reason to go to for, either the food or the library. And so that's what I really like, that people find it. It's almost you're chancing upon this little garage near the sea and so discovering, a neighborhood. And we collaborated on a walkie-texture. And I think that's really important to me, is that idea of building that community and responding to the neighborhood and getting the neighborhood involved in participating in keeping this library going. And that's why Shivaji Park. I hope I answered the question.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kamna. So I think Aditi has to leave, but she's a busy person and she's already rescheduled a flight for us. So thanks so much, Aditi. Thanks so much. We're now going to come to the finale, which is we want ma'am to read a few paragraphs from her book.
I'm going to read the last part of a chapter which is actually a roundup of the buildings that surround or, surround the inside of Shivaji Park, some of which Nikhil spoke of. This is a kind of introduction to the various activities that were established in Shivaji Park by the citizens themselves, cultural and sports activities. So all those little buildings which dot the periphery of Shivaji Park are described, and I'm going to read the end of this chapter and then link it up to the last chapter, which is a kind of personal walk around Shivaji Park and looking at my favorite trees and meeting some favorite people and some not so favorite people. So I'll end with that. Across the road from the park is a narrow lane leading to the crematorium. This is where leaders like Sane Guruji and Dr. Ambedkar were cremated. The crematorium was built with a generous donation from an affluent contractor named Bhagoji Keer, who came to Bombay as a callow youth from Ratnagiri with little education and no experience of life beyond his hometown. He found work with the construction firm Shapoorji Pallonji, learned the ropes on the job, worked hard, and soon established himself independently as a contractor. A bust of Bhagoji Kir has been installed on the corner of the crematorium lane in gratitude for his philanthropy. A crematorium makes a fitting, if somewhat macabre, end to this part of the Shivaji Park story. But I intend continuing for a bit longer. What strikes you most forcibly about Shivaji Park, besides its shady roads and Art Deco buildings, is the openness of the space. By that, I do not mean the obvious, as in a space that is not enclosed. I mean open as in democratic. Shivaji Park is open to all people at all times of the day and night. It is a place to relax in, fill your lungs with fresh air, to hold hands or argue, walk, jog, do asanas, or stretch out for a siesta. It is open for postprandial strolls under the stars or for indulgences like ice golas sold off carts. The Shivaji Park Katta is a beloved seating and sleeping arrangement. No recollection of the park is complete without memories of Katta days flooding in. The Katta is just a low curb around the park, but what possibilities it affords for human interaction. In a blog post reproduced in First Post, Mustansir Dalvi, I think you quoted from this, architect and poet, by the way, compares the snooty oval Maidan at Churchgate with Shivaji Park. The oval, he says, is fenced off with railings that put you in mind of a penitentiary, no matter which side you are on. What could have been, in the absence of the railings, a positive social space, a living room for the city, for all those with purpose and for flanners in general, is now fossilized for the rather vapid pleasure of viewing from the balconies of deco residences. The Shivaji Park Katta, on the other hand, affords unfiltered access from all sides, allowing as extended neighborhood to occupy it and call it their own. Those who have lived in this neighborhood but moved away will feel this sense of ownership even now. To come back to Shivaji Park and shoot the breeze on the Katta is like returning home. Today, the BMC, in its unaesthetic wisdom, has covered this home with glossy plastic chips in ugly orange, yellow, and red, instead of the dull green paint we were used to, and which fitted much better with the surroundings. The chips are already falling out. One hopes they will all be gone one day. As I pass by the Ajoba Aji Udyan on the east side, I hear a commotion. I notice my stalker at its center. Yes, of course, I have a stalker. I at 80 and he 2 years older. We were once colleagues in a South Bombay college. Keen to build up on that acquaintance, he stops his wagon R and honks when he sees me walking to the park. He wants to give me a lift. I ignore his honking. I have noticed that he has grown his hair and tosses it in sprightly fashion. He reminds me of the Surekha Pudekar Lavani. The leaf is ready to fall, but the stalk is still green. Round the corner from this pest, there is a compensation. Pandit Shankar Abhyankar sits on the North Katta with his music-loving friends. A few months ago, he gave me a lift home to play me a bandish in a Ragadeskar, which he had composed and sung for a few select rasikas at Kumar Gandharva's request. It was a pleasure to begin the morning with his alap and quicksilver tans regaling the ear. There are other pleasures for the ear in Shivaji Park. The sound of many tongues. I count them today. I hear Marathi, Gujarati, Kutchi, Sindhi, Kannada, Konkani, and Bombay Hindi. Not so pleasant is Minglish. Today's line was, "मी recently ऐकलं तो continuous बोलत होता." Shivaji Park still exudes a sense of place, but the lovely white-painted single-story Makhanwala house, one Shivaji Park showpiece, is now a rubble with an indifferent earth mover standing on top of the heap. And as I turn the corner to return home, I wince to see the expanse of impossible blue that swathes the lower floors of the tower across the road. The two-story Prabhat with its graceful galleries stood here once. Now, the parking floors of this tower throw their turquoise offense in your eyes. Shivaji Park was once a commons where villagers met. It became a modern precinct where a unique culture grew. You looked across Shivaji Park then and saw trees. Now you see towers dwarfing the trees. One life was ending, another pulsating into being, said Srina Pense about the Dadar of the early 1930s. One might use the same line to describe what is happening to Shivaji Park today. But for all you know, history will describe this as progress, which, if I can repress my nostalgia and preoccupation with heritage, I should admit it is. As a footnote to that, this awful turquoise blue painting, which stands in the corner where I turn into my home. One day, as I was walking home from my walk, a lady with a dog crossed the road, hailed me and said, "You're Shanta Gokhale." I said, "I stand accused." She said, "You've written a book on Shivaji Park." I said, "Again, I'm guilty." She said, "But you know what? I told our builder, look what this writer is saying about our building and about the color on that building. Do something about it." So guess what he's done? You know what he's done. He has kept the blue and he's painted a whole lot of sporting figures on it. Everyone to his taste, what can you say?
Thanks, ma'am. Absolute. Thanks so much.
Shantaji, Nikhil, Kamna, and Aditi for this wonderful discussion. I assume all us non-Shivaji Park residents want to go visit very soon, especially to Aditi's restaurants. As a child, I used to go to Shivaji Park to visit some family friends and in the lane of Tutulia. And then we'd go to the beach and we'd collect shells and other anatomy pieces that you might find. But it was always a wonderful experience to have a beach so close. And Mrs. Kanodia just mentioned we've not talked about the water and the in Shivaji Park. But this was a very exciting discussion. It was the one of our first in the series. Our next one is on Gamdevi. It's on August 13th, right here. So hopefully we'll see you here. Thank you to all our partners, the Goethe Institute, to Bjorn and Jayashri for their collaboration, Kalagora Association, Walkitecture, Jojo Library and Bookshop, X and Zero. In fact, now why I go to Shivaji Park is for our Kalagora meetings at the Miller Studios on a regular basis. I think many of us go there. But thank you for being here in such large numbers and braving the rain. And we've got many interesting programs. We have actually a very interesting workshop for creative practitioners on AI and law on Saturday. So in case of any interest, please come or just stalk us on social media and find out what we're up to. Thank you very much for being here and have a wonderful evening. Thank you once again.